Good evening, good morning, everybody, and welcome to our August webinar for the Free PGC. Before we start, I'd like to say always a few words about the Free Principle Global Community. It's a non-profit organization, and the aim is basically to spread the word about the Free Principle worldwide. So today we have three people, but I want to introduce one person, which is Bonnie. Bonnie is going to step in my shoes from September, so she will be your host. So that's why she's here today. And she will read out the questions. So I would like you to welcome Bonnie, and I'm sure she's going to say a few words.
Hello, everyone. It's a thrill to be able to do this, and I look forward to hearing from all of you in the question area.
Thank you, Bonnie. So now I'd like to introduce our speaker today, who is Annika Hurwitt. She's a Ph.D. and she's a vibrant and empowering consultant whose work awakens people to possibilities and capabilities they have often never considered, and which leads to concrete results at home and at the workplace. She offers a new paradigm for understanding the inside-out nature of life, which allows people to achieve mental clarity and presence through aligning with natural laws rather than using exercises or techniques. Annika coaches women in leadership roles, and executive, management, and sales teams strengthen their rapport skill, improve company culture, and raise productivity. She is the founder and president of Awake Present, which offers 4 days intensive retreats for individuals and couples, training for companies. So with no further ado, I'd like to welcome Annika, and it's all up to you, Annika. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Corinne. I'm so pleased to be here, and you know, before I start a webinar like this, I like to kind of pull back a little bit and try to look at the bigger picture, because I've been doing this now for about 22 years, and so you know, a lot of time has passed, and I've evolved as a teacher, and I continue to evolve and grow as a teacher. And I think that that is one of the incredible benefits and pleasures of being involved with the 3 principles, is that it allows us to align ourselves with the evolutionary intelligence behind life, which is always there. I would just say that before I was introduced to the principles, I was, you know, grappling for it. You know, I had a sense that there was an underlying intelligence to life, and that there was some kind of pattern to life and meaning to life and direction in life. But I was finding little bits of it everywhere. You know, I was trained as a psychotherapist. I trained a lot in what was called spiritually oriented psychotherapy, because I thought there must be a link between what happens for people spiritually, like when they meditate and study spirituality, and what happens for people psychologically when they go for psychological help. It never made sense to me that the two were separated. In fact, as a child, I used to reflect on, why is it that when people go to church or temple, they get religious, and then when they leave, then they're not? Like, what? How could it exist in the building and not exist outside the building? So it's something that's interested me from the beginning, and I know that when I came across the principles in 1990, I was so kind of relieved and stunned and excited to finally find the link between psychology and spirituality that I had been looking for a very long time, and to find something that was so much more fundamental than anything that I'd been able to find in all of my research into psychology and New Age stuff and spiritual paths. So I called this webinar Mental Clarity in a Minute, because one of the things that's been hitting me a lot in the last year or two is what a gift mental clarity is. You know, that when we're in a state of mental clarity, life seems good. We have a sense that we're doing what we're put here to do. we have a sense that we're hooked up with the wisdom and intelligence that is running the system. And that's really just an intuitive knowing. You know, it's just like when people get out on a sports field and they get in the zone, there's a intuitive recognition, oh, now I'm hooked into that deeper power, which is powering up everything. And it's going to make me play the game far better than I could with my limited intelligence, my database, which is very useful, but has much more limited implications. It's so intuitive for us to recognize that deeper intelligence that it's hard to talk about. It's something that we are either connecting with and recognizing, or we're not. I think this is part of why Sid Banks used to say we're all schizophrenic, because when you're connected with that flow, you experience your mental health, you experience your well-being, you feel like you're home, you have an intuitive recognition of truth, you know, that this is sort of where you belong, that you belong in your mental health and well-being. You have a sense of mental clarity. You have a sense of being able to trust your decisions. You have the capacity to receive insight and to know that it's insight, that it's actually something, a level of thinking that's beyond, again, beyond the database. Then, and we all do this whether we know about the principles or not. We all experience this state of mind, again, whether it's playing sports or cooking or taking a shower or driving to work. At any moment, thought can drop, and we are back in the world of mental clarity, where our wisdom and common sense are simply self-evident, and it becomes more obvious what to do with everything in life. And then on the other side, we all fall into, we all have a personal database that we use, which is very useful to us, but we can fall into mental habits that obscure our wisdom and common sense and create anxiety and insecurity and low moods and fear and fights with people, and you can go from one to the other in a heartbeat. And before being introduced to the principles, we all go from one to the other in a heartbeat, and we don't really think much about it. It's like, well, that was what the drive to work was, and now this is what my time at home is, and oh, now this is what, now later, let's say in the evening, your head clears itself and you're back in your mental well-being. You know, there's no bridge. And then when people learn the principles, when they become introduced to them, you suddenly see the logic behind all of it. It's always thought at work. It isn't random. That it's always the quality of your thinking is creating your experience in the moment. So when I pulled back and looked at the larger picture, what really hit me was how much people suffer from their thinking, and how overwhelmed people are by their thinking, and how much unnecessary thinking is going on in the minds of probably the majority of people in the world, and how, because we feel everything we think, you know, it creates a lot of suffering, because a lot of people think in ways that are insecure and anxiety producing and stress producing, and it's painful. So when, again, my title, Mental Clarity in a Minute, really came from how clear it's been becoming for me in the last few years that when Sid Banks talked about thought is the missing link, you know, he has a book called The Missing Link. I know that until recently, you know, that phrase struck me as true, but more from the outside in the sense that I knew it was true, but I couldn't really grasp it on the inside. Like, I just didn't really get it. And what's been hitting me lately is just what a simple and, let's say, all-encompassing tip that is. Because, you know, what the principles of mind, consciousness, and thought reveal is that we're only feeling our thinking in every moment as we go throughout our day. but that it looks like our mind is functioning like a camera, photographing what's outside us, and that that outside event or circumstance or person is bringing us a feeling. But in fact, our mind functions like a movie projector, creating thought, which combines with mind and consciousness, and we are creating the experience of the person or the event or the circumstances moment by moment as we go throughout our day. And that what that boils down to is it's always thought in the moment. And so when you have that awareness, thought, and Sid tried so hard, I would hear him saying, it's so simple, it's so simple. It's thought. But when you start to see that from the inside, then it makes sense, because when it looks like thought creating, let's say your low mood or your anxiety or your stress, it's natural for your mind to clear itself and for your mental clarity to return, because it's illogical for your mind to continue in a direction that's harmful to you. And when it looks like it's the bill you can't pay, or the fight with the friend, or the very cold winter, or the migraine headache, or the noisy neighbor, or whatever event it is from the outside that's causing your anxiety or your stress or your insecurity, the opposite happens. Instead of your mind clearing itself because you're back in touch with the truth, your mind starts to manufacture more and more thinking in almost like a insecure scramble to somehow sort it out. Well, if it's the neighbor, is it because of her mood, or because of her astrological sign, or because of what she ate for breakfast? It's an endless search, like a Google search. And this is when the mind fills and fills and fills and fills with unnecessary thinking. And the next thing we know, we're feeling overwhelmed and bogged down, and it looks like it's coming from the neighbor. That's thought not factored in. But when we factor thought in and we realize, oh, wait a minute, everything I'm feeling about my neighbor right now is coming from my thinking in the moment, now you're back in touch with the truth. And your mind, it's like clicking back into, the train's back on the tracks. Your mind is back in alignment with laws of nature that have been there all along, and that do the work for you of clearing out the unnecessary thinking, allowing your mind to restore itself to mental clarity, and giving you an experience of well-being, so that once again, all that's left, it's sort of, sometimes I'll get the image of like the ocean wave flows in, and when it flows back out, what's left on the beach is a few beautiful shells. What's left in our minds is what's obvious to do next, because all you have when your mind is in alignment with these principles is your common sense and wisdom. When to use your database, when to stop, when to let your mind be on coast, when to be receptive to a fresh thought. Oh, here comes an insight coming down the pike. Now might be a time to prepare for that meeting. All of that just becomes obvious to people when we realize insightfully that our minds are governed by laws of nature, just like everything else in the world. And I think that there's a real beauty and sacredness to that truth. One of the things that I've done since becoming a Three Principles teacher is I've tried to research principles a little bit, and laws of nature and discoveries and the whole history of that and what it means, because that's really the kind of background for these principles. There's a sense of kind of sacredness and awe about the discovery of any of nature's laws, because there's a logic to them and a wisdom to them, and they help us. Like the Fibonacci series, for example, it's this amazing mathematical series that was discovered in nature, that is a progression. 1 + 1 = 2, 2 + 1 = 3, 2 plus 3 equals 5. 3 plus 5 equals 8. So when you look at how shells are formed, they're formed according to that mathematical progression. My forearm is formed according to that mathematical progression. Leaves, flowers, there's this, I mean, when I think about it, I get really touched because it's so deeply intelligent, and it gifts us so much, it aids us so much to become aware of these pre-existing laws, these pre-existing patterns. I gather there was a high school boy who joined like a contest, I think it was 2 years ago, to design the best, I think it was windmill. And he designed one, and it was a national contest mostly joined by adult scientists. And he designed one based on the Fibonacci series, and he won. So, it's the same with these principles. I know for myself that when I remember them, I feel like I'm in touch with sacred laws of nature that have been gifted to us, so that we understand the pattern of what's at work within us psychologically and spiritually at every moment. And when you understand that, you have the capacity to bring yourself back in touch with the deeper truth of what's occurring in every moment. Now, what kind of a gift is that? Versus going through life wondering what it's all about, and going through life feeling lost much of the time in your mental muddles. Remember, I had a spiritual teacher for many years before I was introduced to the principles, and he used to talk about the tempest in the teapot, But back before I learned the principles, I would hear him say these things, but I couldn't put them to use. He'd say, don't get caught up in the tempest in the teapot. I'd say, well, that's great advice, but how do I not do that, So, I think one of the reasons why I like to pull back and get a look at the bigger picture is because you quickly become accustomed to living a mentally healthy life, to living a life of well-being, to living a life of joy, to living a life of love, where you might walk into the grocery store and catch a stranger's eye and have an extraordinarily loving moment, and to have that be a thread that's running through your life regularly is quite different than the life that many of us lived before we were introduced to the principles. And I remember that for myself. So I feel like I've talked quite a bit, and I could keep going, but I'm wondering if there's any questions at this point.
We don't have questions yet, but I'm just going to remind people how they can ask questions. If you're on Google Plus, at the top right corner of your screen, you should have like a little square with multiple little square in. If you click on that, underneath you have Q&A. If you click on Q&A, you can then type your questions and we'll read them out. So don't be shy, go ahead, ask plenty of questions. I'm sure Annika will be more than pleased to answer your questions. So. But we don't have any for the moment, Annika. So.
Yeah. Well, I guess I'll say a few more things about what I see happen with mental clarity is that, people are naturally resilient, and there's a lot of talk out there about how to build resiliency in people. And I just saw one, come up on probably Facebook or the internet, and how is this man? He's got a seminar called Raising Resilient Children. So I thought, well, how does he do it? Well, he takes them out into nature, and that's a wonderful thing. I love to go out in nature. But now I don't know about this man's particular programs, but what I know, what happened to me before I learned the principles is I would go out in nature all the time to try to calm my mind down, and it would work. And then I would come back into life, and my mind would be going and going and going and going. But, you know, I feel that anyone who's looking towards nature to build resiliency or to help people with mental health has a sense of the direction that is the truth about what is the foundation for mental health in people. And I think before the therapy culture, many people look towards nature as a way to kind of restore yourself, to try to get back into mental harmony. You know, and Thoreau, for example, and there's many people who've written about the benefits of nature and you know, the symbolism of a garden. And why is that? Because you know, nature is run by natural laws, and when we're in nature, we feel that. You know, when you look up at a night sky and you see the beauty of you know, the configurations of the stars, you feel like, oh, you know, it's hard not to have a sense that there's an intelligence behind life that's bringing, in a way, law and order, that's bringing a divine order to things. And that divine order exists before and beyond what we can see or touch or feel as we go through our everyday lives, but that it pops into our heads via insight. And that's very reassuring to people. But we are, you know, we're naturally resilient. That's why when you go out in nature or you go on a good holiday, your stress leaves and you suddenly feel more resilient. And actually, you know, one of the things I often heard George Pransky quote is, you know, where do people get their best ideas? On vacation and in the shower. And how businessmen would, you know, work all year round to try to come up with great ideas, and then they'd be on vacation for 2 weeks, and boom, that, you know, the ideas would start popping into their heads when they stopped trying. So, you know, we're naturally resilient when our minds aren't overfilled with too much thinking, with unnecessary thinking, with thinking, repetitive thinking, over analyzing, all of these habits, reaching into the past and the future, which I see people do sometimes as they're going through their everyday lives, just because they don't know that if they just landed in the present and let their minds be quiet, they would get filled up with the rhythm and the nurturance of a deeper intelligence that's always flowing through life. As soon as we do that, whether it's in our everyday life or on vacation, our resiliency comes to the fore. I know for myself that when I'm overwhelmed, I just back off, because I know that my mind will settle itself and I'll have mental clarity again. And if I've really gotten myself, you know, I went through a period last spring where I was just traveling a lot and teaching a lot, and it was a little bit much to handle. You know, so things kind of got piled up at home to a point that felt overwhelming. I knew as soon as I got a break, a little bit of a holiday, it would look different. And sure enough, that resiliency comes to the fore, and the thoughts just suddenly are there. What do you mean you can't handle that? It's so simple to handle that. That's that innate resiliency that we all have. I think that's so valuable to remember, because when we're in a state of mental stress or distress, when we lose our mental clarity, we feel like our resiliency is gone. And yet, it bounces back so quickly. It's very hard to destroy the resiliency of human beings. It's really built into us. And it's a beautiful thing to behold and reflect on, because it doesn't feel that way when our minds are shredding up, shredding our thinking, and our feelings are feel all uncomfortable and overwhelming, and we can feel like you're 1,000 miles away from your resiliency. But there again, learning the principles and remembering it's always thought, you're always feeling, you're thinking in the moment. It allows your mind, no matter how far you get from that sense of clarity and well-being, it allows your mind to clear itself almost instantaneously, and that whole mirage disappears. So another thing that I find for people who learn these principles is they're much more, they take change much more easily. Change is a natural part of life. Life is always changing. And I think when our minds are on track and we're factoring thought in, and our minds are able to function as nature intended, thought coming in, feeling our thinking, thought leaving, feelings leaving, our minds become, much more responsive to life. And so change just makes sense, because change is part of life. Again, if you think about kids, change comes along, they're great, What are we going to do now? We're going to learn something new. It's a natural part of life. And I noticed this with people who have been introduced to the principles and really taken them in, is, you may be going along in a certain direction, thinking you're supposed to live in a certain part of the world, work with a certain population, or send your kids to a certain school, and all of a sudden it all looks different. And then you change. And, I know for myself, I've moved quite a bit in the last 14 years, since my daughter was born, really, which is not supposed to be the best for kids. But it just made sense. It's funny, when she was born, we lived on Martha's Vineyard. I'm just going to keep talking until somebody asks a question. It always feels a little funny in these webinars, of just talking and talking and talking. So anybody want to ask a question, please do. But when my daughter was born, we lived on Martha's Vineyard, and it was quite wonderful. I had a Center for Optimal Living, and I was doing a lot of teaching the principles. This was in the year 2000, and a lot of people were getting on board. And it was an exciting time in my life, because I was really interested in seeing what kind of impact the principles could have with people who were really struggling. And on Martha's Vineyard, people always think, oh, it's for the rich and famous and maybe the well-adjusted. But the year-round residents aren't rich at all, and a lot of people move there because they're anxious and they want to get away from the world. So I had a lot of people, some of whom would come and do a 4-day intensive rather than be hospitalized. I had people with serious mental illness, and it was very, very gratifying to see how much impact the principles had, how most of these people turned their lives around and got off medication. And so it was a great time. And then it just made sense to move out west. My then husband was from the West Coast, and we wanted our daughter in a Waldorf school, and it just felt like the time to move. And so we moved to Whidbey Island, which is near Seattle, and had a great 4 years out there. I was unexpectedly asked to work for Pransky & Associates, and that was quite an honor. And I had got wonderful experience working on a team for the first time in my life, and worked with them for 4 years, learned a lot about working with businesses. Then 2008 came along, and a lot of us had to move, and we moved back to Martha's Vineyard for about 4 years. And then, it wasn't really working for my daughter, and it wasn't working for my marriage. And I had wanted to move to Maine pretty much my whole adult life, but it had never really fallen into place before. And I found a great school for my daughter. And my husband was able to go back to the West Coast, which is where he wanted to be. And we were able to move to Maine, which has turned out to just be fantastic. a fantastic move for both my daughter and I. She has thrived being in this very kind of healthy community that you find in Maine. And thank God, my work has become more global. And so, moving again has not been a problem. But I bring this up because it's all about the capacity to go with change and to really, be able to listen for the cues that life brings you and to trust them. And because I hear from people, not that infrequently, gosh, you really, you've picked yourself up and recreated a new life multiple times. And how have you done that? And it's really, I guess it's sort of like I think it was the Beatles, or maybe it was John Lennon, life is what happens when you're making other plans. I figure this deeper intelligence has a much better idea than I do as to what the plan is. And I'm just doing my best to go along for the ride. And as long as I listen and, respond, things work out beautifully. And I think that that's a real gift, to be able to trust in life and to know that it's going to take you where you need to go. And that whatever falls away is usually clearing the space. It might sound like a bit of a cliche, clearing the space for something better. But in fact, it's evolution. If you allow things to fall away, whatever needs to fall away, then evolution can occur. And it does. So it starts to be hard to be disappointed, because you just don't know what that falling away is going to make space for. And the more you realize that, I would say that that's another, let's say, result of mental clarity, is you're more likely to see the gifts that life is bringing you, and the opportunities that will arise, or let's say, that are arising, and that you'll recognize because your mind isn't distracted with all of this unnecessary thinking. I hope this is making sense to people.
People are very quiet today. I think they're just listening. Maybe it's
Well,
the holiday season.
Well, this happens sometimes when I give webinars, and I guess it's a good thing, except that then I just have to keep talking.
Unless Bunny wants to ask the questions, but for the moment,
okay. It's okay.
People.
I can just say I really resonate with what you were saying about allowing or trusting what's coming through as a former control addict, and someone who also was looking down many paths before I found this understanding. It was very hard for me to trust, and I really find that the more I understand through this, the easier it is. But I don't know if you want to talk to that more. So.
Talk to what specifically?
Just the because this is when I talk to people about the three principles. That's one thing that I hear, probably because that's where I came from. That the trusting what's coming through, the trusting our wisdom is the hard thing to, like, how do you know when it's not just your personal thinking as opposed to wisdom coming through, and what?
Yeah, that's a great question, Bonnie, and I think that most people can find their capacity to trust inside themselves, and that I don't know, I find that for some reason that I don't really understand, that was harder in the beginning when I was teaching the principles than it seems to be now. I used to say to people, start with, who really had a hard time with trust. Start with really small things. Just listen for your common sense and wisdom around really mundane things and just notice if it works out. And that did work for people. I'm just reflecting a little bit on how that's evolved and changed. I think that now it's so clear to people that it's a really different experience when you realize that you're feeling or thinking and nothing on the outside of you. That becomes so clear. And I think that I talk about it a little bit more as a logic. And that seems to really resonate with people and create a trust from the beginning, really, because what's not to trust about logic, especially when you compare it to laws of nature, and principles in general. They're almost beyond the need to develop trust. They're beyond that. They're truth. And I think that truth transcends issues that people have with trust. And you might call it a God-given gift, that we all have the capacity to recognize truth when we see it or feel it. It's unmistakable. And that creates trust in people. Because when you teach them this, it's just truth, 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 and nothing else. And I think for people who've been through a lot of different approaches, that might take a while to realize, oh my gosh, this is really it. There's no other, thing I have to sign up for. I don't have to sign my house over. I don't have to pledge my allegiance to anybody. It's really just some facts that are being presented that have a spiritual origin, and that's it. So I think that the nature of the principles creates trust in people pretty quickly. And it's very refreshing as a teacher, because before this incarnation, teaching this for the last 22 years, I was teaching a whole lot of other stuff. And I can remember the feeling, of trying to get people on board with whatever the latest approach was. It's very refreshing, to feel instead like I'm sharing something that was discovered and that just is very, very helpful and that's already inside of you.
There is a question that came in from Eric. He wrote, trust in maintaining the sense of connection between, such as when meeting new people or trying to get close to others. That is what I'm struggling with a bit. This is the more personal sense of what you're talking about. Could we talk about that?
Could you say the first sentence again?
Absolutely. Trust and maintaining the sense of connection between, such as when meeting new people or trying to get close to others.
Well, I'm assuming that, Eric, that you must mean when you say between, it's really trusting in the unknown. And I think that's really a great question, because I think many of us get nervous when we're in the unknown. And we're often in the unknown when we're relating with people. That somebody you might connect with very well, and then they might have a low day. And they're not connecting with you. And you're in the unknown. You don't know if it's something you've said or done that they're having thoughts about, or that they're having a low day, or that they're, something's come up with their mother. And I think that learning to have trust in that is just exactly the same as trusting in the truth of the principles in every moment. That, let's say that was happening to me and I felt a bit insecure, and then I realized I was feeling my thoughts in the moment about this person, and I have no idea what's going on with them, usually that will just vanish because I know that I don't know. I have, and feeling that from the inside is really the trick. I'm just, thinking about that for a moment. When it really hits you that you know that you don't know, it will also really hit you that it's just as likely that something good is happening as something bad is happening. And it has to hit you from the inside. There's a goodness to that. And I think even deeper, it hits you that whatever's happening, even if they're having negative thoughts about you, it's a moment passing through, and fresher, clearer thinking will arrive for you and hopefully for them. If there is a bump in the road, it's part of life. And that all of that is in the hands of an intelligence beyond our own. So how do we know that it's not a good thing? So that's the direction of faith that I think develops for people as you keep realizing you're feeling, you're thinking in the moment, and all of that's coming from a divine system that has a deeper intelligence than our own. Whether our relationships are going well or poorly. Because often when there's a challenge, something tremendous comes out of it. Especially if we don't let our own insecurities jump in there and we don't, seize the day and make a big mud puddle out of it. If you're able to just listen for what's next when there's a snag in the fabric, then life has a way of straightening it out. I had an extraordinary experience like that recently, which I'll just reference, which is that I'm in an apartment building getting ready to move into a house this next year. But I've been here, first place that we've lived since we moved to Maine, and there's a woman in the building who gets into very low moods, you might say, and then kind of goes on the attack of other members, people in other apartments or businesses in this building, and so she's not that well liked. And we've always been on good terms, but she did it to me a month or two ago, and she copied everyone in the building on this email that she sent me that was extremely hostile. Well, I didn't see the email, but before I ever saw it, the landlord called me from California, the other side of the country. He said, "Did you see the email?" And I said, "No, what email?" He said, "Well, I just want you to know I've already responded." And he took this woman to task. He said, "This tone is unkind and inappropriate. And I don't want you sending emails to Annika like that." He's never done that before. And then one of my neighbors in the building did the same thing. She said, and not only that, but she reached out to this woman with love and caring. That this was an inappropriate email, that her tone was very unkind, and she was concerned that something might be going on with her. And then I sent her an email similarly, I hope everything's okay, and kind of responded to her concerns. Well, I know that in the history of this woman's life, nothing has ever happened like that before. At least in the 2 years since I've been here, whenever she's sent out one of these email bombs, everyone has just either gone quiet or sent her a very hostile response. And so as I watched this, I thought, this is like a miracle. It's the principles at work, taking care of all of us. And, I didn't see her for a month or two after I was away on a business trip when this happened. But the next time I saw her, I was, made a point of being very friendly, and she was very friendly. And I can't help but think that this might have changed her life. So there's so many miracles like that we can point to, really. So I don't know if that was helpful, Eric. I hope it was. But there are, relationships are really what life is all about, because they're an opportunity to share love. And we miss the boat on that so often, just out of our fear and insecurity. And I guess for me, you know, pre-principles, an event like this with this neighbor would have just been very upsetting for me. I would have been embarrassed and hurt and angry, and really none of that happened. I was a little shaken, and then I was just fascinated to see what would happen. And then I was in awe of the principles at work. And you know, that's the beauty. As you get out of the way, and maybe this is helpful to you, Eric, the principles, let the principles do their work. You know, let them clear out any insecure thinking you have in those spaces between connections, and bring in the next set of fresh thoughts, so that you'll do your best and rise to it no matter what's going on with the other person. And hopefully, you know, in a spirit of love.
And Eric did answer. He said, beautiful answer, thank you.
You're welcome.
Annika, I got a question as a comment on the Google Plus page, so I'll just read it out for you. The question was, when, let me try, I have the right one. Yes. When I'm triggered by what appears to be others or something, I can tell myself all day it's my thinking. How do I get myself to really believe that?
What was, again, the first sentence? When I what?
When I'm triggered by what appears to be others or something, I can tell myself all day it's my thinking. How do I get myself to really believe that?
Well, you know, I think that it's very important that you not tell yourself it's your thinking as an intellectual exercise, and that you look to have a realization that the only thing you ever feel is thinking in the moment. And as soon as you realize that, you're going to click right back in. Those thoughts are going to leave and those feelings are going to leave. But if you think about it intellectually, it's not going to do you any good at all. And so there's the difference between reflecting on something and realizing something, how it works, you know, versus using your personal mind to try to change your personal mind. And, you know, maybe you'll have to see what is helpful to you to realize that. You know, times when, you know, have you ever felt anything that besides your thoughts? If you really reflect on it enough, you'll see the truth of it. And if you keep going with it, it's going to hit you from the inside that that's what's occurring in that moment, and that's what's occurring in every moment. When it hits you from the inside, it's like you can't teach somebody to ride a bike by telling them about it. You have to get on the bike and ride. You have to feel it, the truth of gravity and how it holds you up. And we all have the capacity to reach inside ourselves and connect with how it works. It's just built into us. And you have that capacity because it is how it works. But as soon as you think about it intellectually, you're going to feel a deadness. You're going to be in what I sometimes call the dead world, the world of memory. And that's not going to do anything for you. So look to have a realization, and you can experiment with it. Try to think love and feel hate, you know. Try to think about your favorite ice cream and have whatever issues bothering you still bother you. But you can't until your thought comes back to it. And so when we realize how it works, it puts us in the world of insight. And it puts us back in the world of truth. And that's when miracles happen. That's when your mind is going to change itself. And you will experience it happening to you. It's not something you bring about.
Thank you, Annika. We don't have any other questions at the moment, so.
Okay. Well, let me think if there's anything else I'd like to say.
would you like to wrap it up, maybe?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I want to thank everybody. I know it's summer, which is a wonderful time to be talking about laws of nature, because nature is so bountiful in the summer. It's also a time when many people are on vacation. So I wondered, I thought, well, August, that will probably be a time when most people are away. But I hope that those of you who've been on the call, have enjoyed this. And I just want to say how grateful I am to Sydney Banks and to everybody that has become interested in the principles and is working to get them out in the world, because we're in a very exciting time. And for people who are fairly new to the principles, it might be hard to imagine what it's been like for those of us who've been involved for a while. I get all these calls now or emails inviting me to speak here and go there, and it's a little, I haven't gotten used to it yet, because it's new, that the principles are well known enough that that's happening for more and more teachers. So I'm grateful. It's completely changed my life, and I get to, people ask me what I do, and when I describe what I do, they say, "That's what you do for a living?" I say, "Yeah, that's actually what I do for a living." I feel like the luckiest person in the world. So I hope that these principles are helping those of you who are listening and who will listen to this webinar. And I just send my love to everyone in the Three Principles community, and thank you to the 3PGC for inviting me to do this.
Thank you very much, Annika. It was a lovely, lovely webinar. I think we're all in a very nice place. That's why you didn't get much questions. And thank you so much for.
Well, you're
for
very, very welcome.
It was lovely.
Thank
Thank you. And next month it will be Jan Chipman. So we hope to see you next month. Bye bye, everybody.